Hi, I'm Chef Tammy Brawley from the Green Kitchen. Today we're going to show you how to make some delicious chicken and dumplings. We're going to start by making homemade chicken broth. There's nothing like it for any kind of recipe that's a base. And what we've done here is we've added 4 cups of water. We're going to use the Instapot, which I think probably a lot of people have these days. Best way to make broth, and it only takes about 30 minutes or so. So I've got 4 cups of water so far, and we're going to go ahead and add the vegetables. I learned to make chicken stock in culinary school, and we actually learned to go ahead and use the peel for the onion, so I'm really not concerned about that. Concerned about peeling it, that is. I'm going to go ahead and add the whole onion to part of the water that I've got. Same thing with the celery. We're actually going to use the leaves on the celery, so we're just going to kind of rough chop the celery. Now I went ahead and bought just the baby carrots in the grocery store. I don't see any reason not to use those. If you want to cut them in half, you can. Just for time purposes, we're going to ahead and add probably about a half of a bag, maybe a third of a bag. Now one thing we're not going to do at this point is season the chicken broth, okay? You want to actually get this flavored with the vegetables and then come back later after it's been strained, and that's when you would actually season it. I cooked a whole chicken, and we have the carcass here. I pulled the meat off already because we're going to go ahead and use that in the chicken and dumplings. But the carcass I saved. I'm going to add that to our Instapot. I'm going to add another 4 cups of water. So it's a total of about 8 cups of water, which is 2 quarts. We're going to set the Instapot under the broth setting. And it's going to take about a half an hour. All right, so now that our chicken broth is almost done in the Instapot, we're going to go ahead and make our dumplings. We've got about 1 3/4 cups of flour in our little container here. I don't want to add it all because, one, I need enough to roll out the dumplings themselves. So we'll leave a little flour in the container. We're going to add a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of baking powder. And you want about a 1/3 cup or so of vegetable shortening or lard. In this case, it's lard. Now you can get in here a couple different ways. If you have a pastry blender, that's great. A pastry blender is a tool that's got 2 blades on it. You get in here with 2 forks. And you just want to get in here and kind of mash it up a little bit. You want a crumbly sort of texture. Might even get in there with my fingers in just a few minutes. This takes just a couple of minutes, but not that long. You almost want it crumbly like a graham cracker crust texture sort of thing. This is just about ready for our milk. Recipe calls for about 3/4 cup of milk. You may not need that much, so you want to add a little bit and stir it in and see if you need to add any more. You also may not need as much liquid if it is a rainy day, believe it or not. Moisture in the air can affect all sorts of baking. So we're going to add probably about a half a cup to start. I'm going to come back in here with a fork again. We do want it a little thick, but I can tell by the way it feels with my fork that it's not enough milk. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit more. Now I can tell it's definitely come together, which is great. Now I want to put a little flour on my board here. Come back in here with our fingers. We're going to get messy. But that's half the fun of cooking, if you ask me. Dump our dumpling dough out onto the floured board. So we're just going to roll that dough around a little bit. I can tell it's very sticky still. I may have added just a tad too much milk. So I am going to incorporate a little bit of flour into it. Now, the texture feels really good. I think I'm doing well with it. About ready for my rolling pin. Definitely. All right, we'll grab a rolling pin that you have waiting, and you just want to kind of go out flat with it. You don't want these terribly thick. I know growing up, I think my mom used biscuits, if I'm not mistaken. These are actual dumplings. These are going to be cut in sort of rectangular, odd pieces. You don't really want it terribly, terribly thick. I think it tastes better when they cook as well. There we go. We're probably looking for about 1/4 inch thick or so. Don't forget to roll the side closest to your body. People do tend to forget that when they're rolling out dough. All right, that is pretty much done. Now we want to cut our dumplings. Don't worry about consistency and size. It's all right. And don't worry about that either. I see the ragged edge. Maybe do a little flour on your knife. And if you're only feeding 2 people, this might be a little much, but it's certainly big enough for a family of 4. Then again, leftovers are always a great thing. All right, there's our dumplings ready to cook, and now we have to take our chicken broth out of our Instapot. It's still under pressure, I know, so I'm going to go ahead and release that manually. All right, so the pressure's been released. We're taking our lid off now, and there is that delicious chicken broth. Even without seasoning, it just smells heavenly. So I'm going to step off of camera for a moment to empty it into a colander. The colander is actually setting in a pot. Obviously, I want to reserve the broth, so I'm going to take it off camera for just a second. Now, if we wanted to cool this completely overnight, it's a good thing to do. Then tomorrow we could actually skim off the fat, but we don't, for time purposes, we're not going to do that. We're just going to sit it here for just a moment. I'm going to add the broth. All right, so our broth has started to come to a boil. We're going to add some dumplings. You don't want to grab them up by the handful because then that's how they'll cook in the broth. You really want to add them separate. Kind of be a little quick about it. They're going to start to float to the top. They should pretty much be done then. All right, these are all floating to the top. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove them onto a pan. You don't want to let them sit too long either because they'll start sticking together. So you really want to move a little quick. Get all of your dumplings out. Now the chicken that I cooked was about a 5-pound or so bird, and it produced quite a bit of meat. So I don't know that I need to add all the meat to the broth, but it is a combination of dark and light meat. I am definitely a dark meat girl, so I prefer more of the thigh and the legs as opposed to the breast. But a mixture of the two are great as well. So we have a spoon. I'm going to stir it. I just want to kind of see how much chicken is in there. Definitely could stand a little bit more. Now we're going to go ahead and add the dumplings back in. So if they were a tad undercooked, this is when the cooking process will continue. This is just about done. It's time to get rid of that spatula and just use the spoon. Now it's at this point you would maybe taste it and see if you needed to add any salt or any sort of seasoning. I can tell based on my preferences of how I like to do chicken and dumplings, I do want this broth just a little bit thicker. So I'm going to go ahead and stir in a few tablespoons of cornstarch into some milk that I have waiting. It's going to give it a nice creamy texture. Now I don't have a spoon handy to taste it, but I'm smelling it and I think it already needs to add some salt. All right, so now it has cooked for a few moments with the chicken in there. I added a little bit of a mixture of the cornstarch and milk mixture to thicken it. It is ready for service. We're going to put some in a bowl here. And I cannot wait to dig into this. And there you have it, chicken and dumplings. I'm Tammy Brawley with The Green Kitchen, and we hope you'll join us again on Heart of the Home.
Recipes from the Heart of the Home can be found on the Virginia Farm Bureau website at vafb.com/recipes, as well as on Chef Tammy Brawley's website at greenkitchenrichmond.com.